Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in tonight. On behalf of Mitchell Kaplan, the Miami Book Fair, and all of us at Books and Books, I welcome you to a virtual evening with Darcey Steinke to celebrate the paperback release of Flash Count Diary, Menopause and the Vindication of Natural Life, published by our friends at Picador. Flash Count Diary will change the way you think about menopause. It's a complex, spiritual, and deeply feminist book, honest about the intimations of mortality that menopause brings, while also arguing for the ascendancy, beauty, and power of the post-reproductive years. Darcey is the author of the memoirs Easter Everywhere and the novels Milk, Jesus Saves, Suicide Blonde, Up Through the Water, and Sister Goldenhair. With Rick Moody, she edited Joyful Noise, The New Testament Revisited. Her books have been translated into 10 languages, and her nonfiction has appeared in the New York Times Magazine, the Boston Review, Vogue, Spin, and many, many other publications. She's been both a Henry Hoynes Fellow and a Stegner Fellow, as well as a writer-in-residence at the University of Mississippi, and has taught at the Columbia University School of the Arts, Barnard, the American University of Paris, and Princeton. In conversation with Darcey this evening is Ada Calhoun. Ada is a New York City-based journalist and the author of St. Mark's is Dead, named the best book of the year by the Boston Globe and Kirkus, Wedding Toast I'll Never Give, named one of the top 10 memoirs of the year by W, and the generation-defining sensation Why We Can't Sleep, Women's New Midlife Crisis, which came out in January 2020. A popular freelance writer and editor, she has also ghostwritten or co-written 14 nonfiction books for major publishers. Throughout this evening's broadcast, you're invited to ask questions by clicking the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to those right after their talk. You can find Flash Count Diary for purchase at Books and Books below by pressing the green button, and every purchase you make really helps keep Books and Books up and running, so don't hold back. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the stage. Hello.
Right. Hello. Thanks for having us. Hey.
This is so fun. It would be more fun if we were at Books and Books.
Totally.
Drinking mojitos in Mitchell's courtyard down there with Christina and everybody. But this will have to do. We can imagine ourselves there tonight. So I'm really honored to be here discussing this book. It's brave and groundbreaking. I got it on the ground floor, Darcey, as you know, when you sent me a piece of it when I was freelance editing for The Cut. And that piece got such an amazing reaction. People were so grateful for it. It felt like just a whole new way of thinking about this very taboo period of life. So I just want to start by talking about that taboo. I mean,
okay.
So I was totally blindsided by perimenopause, and I was very angry. I was like, I go to my doctor every year. Why is it that nobody has ever mentioned this terrible thing? So the book was a really great gift. And I'm wondering if you can just talk about why is it when every woman goes through this, perimenopause for 10 years before menopause hits, and menopause usually hits around age 51.
Right.
This is nothing new. Why is it not something we talk about?
All right. Okay, great. I mean, I just want to say that I'm also so grateful for you because I had the idea about the killer whales and menopause, and you were my first reader that actually said, like, this is a really good idea. So that means a lot. Like, as you know, that means a lot to a writer, right? Like the very first person who says, like, this is a good idea.
It's a really good idea.
And then your book is such a beautiful, amazing thing about women's health and women's life too. So I want to get to that too. I have some questions for you as well.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So why is it a taboo? I think there are many reasons. I think the kind of core reason is that, we've only been able to really support ourselves as women for maybe the last 100 years. We really were reliant on men for our survival, and we're mostly valuable for men traditionally for our sexuality, our ability to have children, and our mothering ability, right? So it's I think what really happened in a kind of an atavistic way is when those things fall away, we're not fertile anymore. We're not raising children anymore. It's not only a taboo, it seems dangerous. Like, it seems like our place, right? Like, we might not be able to survive. You know what I mean? Like, our place in the world of men becomes a lot slipperier, a lot more, and so I think that is a thing. And that might have been true even before, like, I don't know what it was like in like 1100, but like, it's possible, right? Like, if all your survival has to do with a man, well, you're going to be really conscious of trying to protect the things that he cares about. And when you start to lose the main things he cares about, that might have to be a secret situation. You know what I mean? Because it's dangerous. Okay. Yeah. So I think that's really big. I also think, sadly, there's been a disconnect. I mean, we're going to talk about the history of menopause. And I mean, I just think the 50s were a terrible, terrible time. I wasn't alive, but the trauma that my mother seemed to have gone through. And I think there was a disconnect. I'm going to talk about why I think that was too. But I think mothers really didn't, I think for my generation, and maybe your generation too, I mean, we're not that, we're 10 or 15 years apart.
Close,
but yeah. I don't think mothers really gave a lot of information to their daughters about menopause. I mean, I knew my mother, I could tell my mother was suffering, but I don't think she ever once mentioned why, So I think I interviewed about 100 women for my book, and that became the story over and over again. I don't think I found one woman whose mother sat them down and told them about menopause. That is amazing, right? So I think there's that as well. So it kind of like the taboo continues because your mother doesn't really want to tell you about it. And then the healthcare is a whole nother thing. I mean, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, I feel like, what should happen is when you have sex ed, they should do puberty, birth, menopause, but they don't. It's like after birth, it sort of like goes off and you get married, and then it's you know what I mean? There's no, like, what happens to the body after is not. So, I mean, I know in like England, it was like newsflash, they're going to finally talk about menopause and sex ed, but I'm glad they're doing it, but it's sort of amazing that it has to be newsflash. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So I actually think there's been like such a lack, there's been like a, many-fold lack of information. And that just feeds the taboo. And then it feeds because there's no information, it also feeds the sort of making a joke out of it rather than like, rather than like, this is what happens. It's not a big deal. But then instead, because you don't know anything, then you make a joke. Like, so many women, it was, when I went out for the actually hardback, part of the most beautiful part, one of the hardest part for me was, the women after my readings would come up and tell me how people made fun of them at work, for being hot. And also sometimes their families would their husbands and their children would gang up against them and make fun of them as well, Because it's like one of those weird pockets where it's still sort of, it doesn't seem like this to me for sure, but like, it's still okay to sort of make fun of this,
Yeah.
Would you make fun of someone that was having a seizure? You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't, it's like, and that's basically, it's like in a much smaller version, something is happening to your body when you have a hot flash, right?
Right.
So I don't know.
Wanda Sykes has that line to what you just said about, the sort of the danger of entering that phase of life and having to keep it secret. She said, when you get older, you can't bring life into the world. And so they set you on fire.
Yeah. Well, that's very good. Yeah. I think there's something that's like very direct. That's very her. Yeah.
So you do this amazing job of giving the historical context of menopause, which I just loved. And you talked about, for instance, in the 17th century, women who had hot flashes in front of other people could be accused of being witches.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that and about your research, which is just phenomenal for the book?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's interesting because I went pretty far back, but it's interesting, like menopause itself isn't really talked about like in texts like 1400, 1500, 1600. It's really in the witch thing is the kind of first thing, which is sort of fascinating.
That is.
And it was very upsetting to see that one, like if you had a wart, if you were nice to your cat, if you got red and threw open the window and needed a glass of water, like these were all signs of being witches, That was very upsetting when I started to see that over and over again, so that really wasn't an easy thing for menopausal women. I also think that, a lot of women of that age, if you weren't protected by a husband, if you didn't have a lot of money, you were sort of pushed to the sidelines. And that's what witches were. They were women that, that the society, sort of wanted to discount, right? So it makes sense that like menopausal women were sort of part of that group. I mean, it really, when you look at the medical literature, like I spent a lot of time at the this wonderful, wonderful library, like in New York City, the Library of Medical History. And so there's all these books. I mean, they're mostly depressing, but like, from the 1800s, where they're supposedly like the medical history of menopause, and that's when you start to hear about menopause. And it is really interesting. And some people, I'm not saying that I agree with this, but some people think of menopause like a syndrome, almost like hysteria, a bunch of symptoms that have been collected and sort of made into something. Like in the same way that we know that hysteria is not exactly real,
Right.
And I'm not saying I believe that, but I think that's very interesting. And there is something to that for sure. That like all these things that are part of normal aging are a part of us being pissed off in a feminist way when we turn 50, you know what I mean? Become like menopause is so terrible, you know what I mean? So I think we need to watch out for that. That's like a big thing. So, and in the 1800s, it was rough. It was like women were put in, I mean, there's a long tradition of women who've been behaving badly who get institutionalized, right? But that was really big, like in, middle-aged 50-year-old women, like it'll say on their like intake form, the change.
Oh, wow.
Which is so like, oh, it's almost like sci-fi. Like, and I mean, the beauty of it is sci-fi and it's really cool actually. But the idea of like the change, because it's so terrible, it's like, so that was amazing to see. Like I kind of looked through those records some to see, and it's a lot. I mean, I would say at least a quarter of all women in their 40s and 50s that were, put into state asylums in the 1800s, it was because of the change. So it became like a thing that like you're not just normally going through something actually like you're actually crazy. And then I think in the like 1900, 1920s, I mean, I'm sure you've read about this, like things got a little bit better for women, between 20 and like the end of World War II. Well, World War II was like, and also like there were these clinics that were called family health clinics, but really they were like really cool doctors to tell you like how to have better sex lives. Like in the 1930s, that would help men understand women's bodies. But that all changed when the men came back from the war in 1945, because the men were like, I mean, I'm so mixed on this because of course, like the men were broken and fragile and the women were told to not worry about themselves or their pleasure. Don't put any pressure on them at all. Just support their like fragile male egos because of they're broken by the war, So that was when, and then like 1945, very close to the 50s, right? So that terrible decade where everything really became, very not good for menopause. And menopause was seen as like almost like a kind of death. I think it was in the end of the 50s or the early 60s that Feminine Forever came out.
Oh, Feminine Forever, the notorious and insanely named book. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's the book where the doctor Wilson, right? Is it Robert Wilson? I think Robert Wilson, right? Like he basically just said that he had a patient who, surprise, at 55 had a wonderful, moist vagina. And it turned out that it was because she had stayed on her birth control pills. And then he was like, oh yes, we can, women are dying before their time. They need to stay pliant. And, I mean, that's really the book that casts menopause as a disease. Right. So, and then there was lots of hormone taking, which I'm not against. I feel like there's no wrong way to go through menopause. For sure, the hormones were too strong at first, and a lot of women died of breast cancer, a lot, and I talked to some of those women's daughters, and then which is, I don't even know. It's like, I don't even know what to say now is in a way, it's like, I mean, we hear, in Fleabag, we hear about it like a little bit more in a positive way, right, in the media, right? But I sort of wonder sometimes, like, where are we really, as far as like women feeling, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And I think that the book does such a beautiful job of asking that question from so many different and surprising angles. And one of the more surprising angles that is unique is killer whales. So, and I see is that a whale poster behind you that I think I see?
My whale poster. Has every kind of whale on there. Yeah.
So I'd actually like for you to maybe read something, if you don't mind, at this point, about maybe from that section about killer whales. And meanwhile, while Darcey is doing that, I would like everybody to look at the bottom of the screen and please buy the book from Books and Books. There's a really beautiful little flashy green button for that. And then to the right, there's a chat. And ask questions. We both love a Q&A, Darcey and I can help her with questions all day long, but we would like to hear your questions, and they can be as revealing or not revealing as you choose.
I'll take
while
all
she's reading,
comers,
think up, yes, we both will answer anything. So start asking questions, buy the book, and then listen to a reading of a couple pages.
Okay, I think I'm just going to read like half a page, but I think I'll talk actually just for a minute. So a big part of this book was that I was 52, menopause was happening. Like, as I was saying, I was finding no way, like, I didn't really know any way to understand it. My doctor seemed to not even know what was going on. Like, and I looked for, as a writer, I always look for books, you know, to help me. And I really couldn't find that many good books. Like, there were so few medical books. All the memoirs would sort of end with the come to Jesus moment of taking hormones, which I'm not against, but then it seemed to like end menopause too, which is not really the way, you know, it's like, it's a female life passage. It's not like that you heal it and it's done, you know? So I was really frustrated, and it all seemed so negative too. So the first really positive thing I found was I was reading the New York Times on Tuesday. They have the Science Times, and there was a little section about how the two creatures that go through menopause are human women and female killer whales. And then I went to the article in Nature, and in that same article, they speculated that because when whales go through it, like at around 40, they go around 45, and then they become the pod leaders, the post-reproductive pod leaders of their families and their communities. They are the leaders when they're searching for food. They're the leaders in helping whales are very smart and sophisticated, like helping the different members get along, and they're just become amazing leaders. And they speculated in that article that the same reason that it was selected in whales, because there's a lot of confusion why menopause was selected, because like according to Darwinian fitness, we should just breed like everybody else to the very end. Like all creatures pretty much breed to the end, right? So it's confusing why we stop in midlife. So this article speculated that whales stopped really because of leadership, because the female 45, 50-year-old whales got so smart, they split into two women, one to do the incredibly important work of mothering. I mean, that work is it's beyond important, you know, to the world. But then this other group to kind of be leaders, you know. So, and that was the first positive thing that I had heard. And they also moved it on over to hunters and gatherers. They sort of said that, like, before you could look up like which, you know, what plants are poison, you know, what does the ocean look like when a tsunami's coming? You had to go to the old lady in your village. She was like 90, and she would be like, that plant is poison. That was why it was selected in our early groups as well. It was because 50-year-old women got so smart, they had to have this other. So that was the first actually organically, just deeply optimistic thing I had heard about the passage. Okay, so then that led to an unbelievable obsession with whales. The whales in this study are the southern residents. They live in the Salish Sea. There's a J-pod, L-pod, K-pod. They're very heavily studied. They were studied for this thing. They've been studied by the Whale Research Center for like 30 years. There's lots of footage of them. I would watch them on YouTube. I would read blogs about them. I got the live link to when they would be swimming down like around the island. I would hear them calling to each other from my office in Brooklyn, you know. And then finally I got so much, I have to try to see them. So, and particularly this one whale, Granny, who is, she was 104. She's known as J2. She's one of the first whales. It always makes me mad because J1 was actually her son. But because some male scientists did it, they were like, J1, the male, J2, the female. But really it should have been, but J1 should have been J2. But okay, but J2 is Granny. So I finally got in my boat and tried to see Granny. And I think the one thing I have to say before I just read this paragraph is my hope had been to memorize all the dorsal fins. That's how you can recognize actually whales, is they have these big dorsal fins. And they're all kind of unique. They have scratches, and Granny has a little notch in hers, probably from a run-in with a boat propeller when she was younger. So she was sort of the one whale that I had any sense that I might be able to spot. So, all right. So this is after like flying to Seattle, driving up the coast in the van, going on the ferry, getting in the sea kayak, going, sea kayaking is hard, man. It's like, wow, it's like really long, like going 10 miles out of the sea. It's like, okay, so here we are. Okay, now I'm gonna read this paragraph. Okay. I'm in the sea kayak. As the whales swim closer, talking stops. The concentration is acute, singular. I feel my pulse speed up, my heart shaking, my rib cage. 2 whales surface 10 feet in front of our kayak. Their eye patches so white they glow, and their dorsal fins stretching high in the air. Ka-woof! Their blowholes go off one after another. The kayaks jumble together on the confused sea. I am a small land creature floating on the edge of a vast ocean populated by giants. When I look down, I see several whales swimming beneath our boats. White tummies moving under translucent green water. Our kayak rises up, and in front of me, only a few feet away, is a massive killer whale. Ka-woof! I see a brown eye looking directly at me, the shining, numinous expanse of body. It's Granny, Matt says. I see the notch. So, and that was my, he was with me. He was my tour guide. There's about 20 of us, but he's with me. So it was unbelievable to see Granny. Also, I couldn't believe that I got to see her. Like my main whale that I wanted to see. It was just like a miracle, basically.
It's like the fantasy every writer has when they go to do like on a research trip where you're like actually going to get the thing you're trying to get, and how rare it is to actually get the thing exactly how you want it.
I had convinced myself that okay, not seeing whales is just as important as seeing whales, and I can work with that, particularly spiritually. I can work with that. Right.
But
when I saw her, I was just like, it was almost kind of like funny because I was just like, oh my God, you know what I mean? It happened, it was just such a beautiful moment that I still think about. And the amazing thing about her when I saw her is she was with like a whale that she travels with actually a lot, like a younger whale. It's also the whale because she's gone now. She died about a year later. The very last picture of her about 3 weeks before her death, or when she went missing from her pod, it's a drone picture, and it's her corralling her body so this younger whale can get the salmon.
Oh.
So that to me is like, wow, but she was very when I saw her, it wasn't like a beautiful moment of interaction. It was like, her look was more, it was kind of censorious. It was just kind of like, what the frig are you doing? You know what I mean? It was a little bit like, get your shit together. It was very and I love it for that. It wasn't this rich ladies and their elephants. It wasn't like that at all. It was like,
right.
It was very much,
eyes.
Yeah, it was very raw and what are you going to do with your life? I mean, that's what it was like more,
Right.
Yeah.
That's a very authentic spiritual experience. I think it's not necessarily friendly all the time when we confront the numinous. And so, I wanted to ask you about religion, because you've written, so eloquently about faith and mysticism in so many of your books. I'm going to talk about the spiritual side of this period of life for you, and then also for women in menopause. I think that looking for meaning in this change is something that your book does so beautifully. So it's not just like a bunch of inconvenient symptoms. It's actually a transition that's important to look at.
Yeah. I mean, would anyone say that birth was just nothing? You know what I mean?
Right.
It makes me kind of crazy in a way.
Yeah, or puberty, which is celebrated by all kind of rituals. And then for menopause, we have nothing. No.
I mean, the coming of age novel, we have a whole literary genre based on it, right?
Point.
I mean, it's just kind of amazing to me how people are like, oh no, but this is just a bunch of symptoms to get rid of, and now I'm just as young as I ever was. I was fantastic.
Yeah.
But that's not how I felt. I mean, I felt really and I felt like all my symptoms, which are super annoying, and there's no doubt about it, my up at night, the insomnia was really hard for me. The hot flashes were really hard for me. But in a way, it was like spiritual graduate school. It was like I actually felt like the hot flashes were actually, see, there we go.
I'm not having a hot flash. I'm just really hot because it's very stuffy in here.
That's okay. But it's sort of like the hot flashes were actually burning off my old self. You know what I mean? I actually felt like a new, I write in the book about how I felt sort of early on when I was really confused by the hot flashes. It's I felt like something wanted to get out of my body.
Mm-hmm.
And like something did get out, and she was really cool. You know what I mean? like that's sort of what it was. You know, it was like, it doesn't seem like the symptoms to me are just like to like erase completely. Certainly sometimes they're terrible and we need to do things to help ourselves. But I also think for me, it was really important to kind of reframe it a little bit, right? To reframe it as just like, look, this is what's happening. And like I'm a creature among creatures. And what is this? What can I get from this that's like deeper than just like, and even being up at night, frankly, I actually feel like, I think for me, a big part of like a menopause was like, and maybe it's also this time of life, like your 50s, it's sort of like, it's hard to explain, but you sort of have to like, or I felt like I had to kind of like reorient myself to my expanse of my life. Like it was less like the next thing. I sort of had to be like, oh yeah, the next thing, but look at all these other things you did, you know, like good and bad. So when I was up at night, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of like, you know, it was true. I was wandering around my house, like holding an ice pack to my forehead. But there was another way in which I was sort of like thinking about the things that I was proud of, thinking about the things that I wasn't proud of, but also like kind of, I mean, I don't know how to say this, but like learning to value my own life because it was my life, you know, I'm only going to have one life, you know, and just sort of thinking about its expanse and thinking about myself, like in that expanse, that's happened. And then going forward. And I don't think I had that experience before. And I think if I hadn't been up so many nights, it wouldn't have happened. You know what I mean? I actually think that like the insomnia partly brought me that in a way, like, you know, I mean, it's true that I also eventually got some help for my insomnia, you know, but I also think it's certainly not perfect. I'm still up more than I would like to be, but it was helpful. It wasn't just bad, you know, and I think that's the spiritual sort of rejigging, I think, actually, right? Like, yeah.
I think that's lovely. And, you know, I started to wonder, because I still wake up a lot in the middle of the night, and like, are we supposed to meet up? Like I found out like all my friends were also up at like 3 a.m. I'm like, is there a town square we're all supposed to convene at?
Yeah, it might be. It's like, it's like the horse monster. I mean, because I read a lot, like actually for my insomnia chapter about sleep. Yeah. You probably know this because it's been very widely reported, but supposedly people used to sleep till about 11 and 12 and then get up. Actually go to bed very early and then get up and sort of like socialize for 2 hours and then go to bed again at 2 or 3. It makes so much sense for us.
I love it. Yeah.
We should do it. Like, why not?
Let's do it.
We're also like wide awake. It's not like you're just like a little sleepy. Like it would be cool to have a conversation and maybe have a glass of wine at like 12:15 to 3 a.m.
Yeah. I like that idea very much.
Yeah.
So I want to encourage people again, ask questions in the chat, so that I don't, you know, because otherwise I can just ask Darcey all my questions forever. But one thing I wanted to bring up is sex. So I think a lot of people don't think of menopause as a sexy time. I know one thing I've heard from a lot of women is like, I don't want to talk about menopause because it's a sign that I've like given up on sex or something like that. Yeah. I think that's part of the taboo you've talked about. But the book is very sexy, your book. It's like, it's very erotic. And I think they give this line in there that's, there is the mind, and nestled like an egg in its nest, the erotic imagination, but there is also the body. And you talk about all of these things very beautifully and very, very sexily. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about sex at this age and sort of, you know, why people don't talk about it and what they should be talking about.
Sure. Okay. Well, this is a big subject. And I think it's a subject that's like been, I mean, even more than the other taboos, this is the biggest taboo, I think, in a way, right? Like, I mean, I was watching the movie, I really loved it, The Wife, you know, but it upset me because in the first like minute of the movie, I think they're 2 70-year-olds and they wake up in the morning and he wants to have sex and he quickly penetrates her. I'm just like, no, that's like impossible. I mean, there would be like some lube. I mean, I'm not saying that's not impossible because I'm sure it would be a beautiful sexual thing, but it's like it's like a sex scene is different at 70 than 20. And it's possibly even better, but it's not the same, you know? So it's like, I mean, that was the thing that surprised me the most. And I can remember thinking like, wow, some positions that I used to like, I didn't like as much. Like I was like not as comfortable maybe with penetration. And I remember talking to my doctor and she was like, she didn't even mention menopause, which is kind of fascinating in a way. And then I had to Google it out like many women do, which is kind of sad for us. We're like, yeah. I feel like a lot of female health problems, you're just like Googling it out,
right.
by yourself.
Rather than going to an elder, in a tent.
Yeah, totally. You're just Googling it out. And you get a lot of bad information Googling it out too, because partly because menopause is treated so crappily. And so, it's such a demeaning way so many places. But my feeling was that my body had changed. I wanted different things. I felt maybe somewhat less interested in like as much sex, but I don't think it was like a drop off. I think 30s, 40s, so that was still the same. I think the same amount as 30s. Maybe I still wanted a few times a week or whatever, but the things I wanted were different for sure. Like I wasn't as interested in penetration. And the thing I want to say about this, which I'm really worried about a lot of women, is I think because a lot of the hormone doctors that I went to, like one of them said this thing that really has haunted me, where she said, my patients don't want to enjoy sex. They just don't want it to hurt. Oh. Okay. She's talking about sex just as penetration, which is really a problem. Okay. Because there's so much more on the menu. You know what I mean? And B, she's not really talking about women who are acting from their authentic desire. She's talking about women who want to stay with the fertile script, stay with where they were before. Mm-hmm. And that really is a kind of oppression to me that I feel really strongly. I mean, I feel like that's really kind of crazy. It's like, and it makes sense. I mean, let's face it. And I've never seen this ever written about, which is crazy. It makes sense that you would want to do different things. You can't get pregnant anymore. You know what I mean? Like, you would get totally crazy. Yeah. It's still on the menu. It's still very cool. Like it's great, but it might not be the main thing. There might be other things that you're interested in as well, and I think part of the disconnect between couples sometimes at this time is they've maybe done foreplay sex or sadly just, foreplay penetration or just penetration, but they've done one thing the same way. And now it's rather than having your wife get drugged, you know what I mean? to be able to do that still and do it in a way like the wifely duty. Don't you want to have a conversation with her about what she really wants? Mm-hmm. And you can really enliven your sex life again, and so I found this to be kind of the saddest part of my book. The saddest, most mind-blowing part was for me to realize, my desires have changed, and that's okay. I talked to this one amazing sex therapist, Jonathan Huber. He's Canadian, and he said to me that the main thing about keeping sexual as you get older is actually unlearning all the things that are supposed to be the givens about sex. So, for instance, people who like sex are bad. Couples should come at the same time, which is wrong. You know what I mean? Only penetration. Every single thing that you learn about sex is actually kind of wrong when it comes to actually two people trying to give each other pleasure. And so he really helped me to think about, the aging sex life in a way that was more exciting too. He's done a long study on couples that continue to have amazing sex. And he told me about all the ways they do that. So, and one of the ways is to sort of unlearn what they thought they knew about their sex lives, and that's that was a big thing for me. So I think the key is to sort of get off the script that you were on before. Mm-hmm. Communication is key. I know when I was on, I was lucky enough to be on NPR for this book, and I was talking about this, and I did happen to mention lube, which is amazing, and then I got all over the country, I started to get free samples of lube. I now have 50, I have, CBD lube. I have every kind of lube in the world.
We should have advertising on this.
Yeah,
we should have a scroll
lube. Yeah. But and it was interesting because after that spot, I talked about communication, and after that spot, somebody that worked with her, Alyssa Chang, tweeted, a menopausal sex is like gay sex, communication and a lot of lube. And I just love that because that is kind of what we're looking for. We're looking for more talking about what feels good. And, you may need, there's no shame in this at all. It's some people need glasses. Some people mm-hmm. don't. As you get older, you need glasses. Does anyone think that's just the saddest thing in the world? No. And it's the exact same thing with lube. There's just no. So I don't know. It's just, this part is the hardest part though, because I think women blame themselves when they don't like it the way they did in the same way, I think sometimes men will blame them too. Their partners will blame them too. It's very hard. I mean, talking about sex is really hard. It's like one of the hardest things, I think. And I think it is one of the harder things about menopausal, like the menopausal transition for sure. For both I think both parties. I think men feel a loss too, so I think that's a thing for sure.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. I think that's great. And I like the glasses analogy. Like there's no shame.
No,
we got a lovely question in the chat, which everybody should be going in and adding questions now. Because I have many more, but I want to hear yours too. So Laura Tepper says, thanks for this, Ada and Darcey. I love both of your books. How do you account for the notion of not really remembering menopause? I have received this response from a few elders in my family, and I'm confused by it. Is there any scientific basis to this, as in forgetting the trauma of pregnancy? Good question.
That is a good question. Do you want to go on that first?
I don't know. I haven't heard that before.
Have you forgot the trauma of your pregnancy pain?
No.
I don't think I have either. I was like,
but I do hear that, you always hear that when there's a second or third child, that it's because
they keep doing it.
There's been this amnesia about childbirth and how violent it is.
I mean, it's an interesting question why the women say I do have one friend who did tell me that it was nothing to her and she couldn't remember it. And she's like,
what was that accent? Was she French?
No, she was like I loved her. She Marion Cohen, this fantastic writer, but she was a little older. She was older than my mother, even probably like by 10 or 15 years. And I actually think it was that, I mean, she did have like an incredible life spirit, but I also think it was that she thought it would be uncool to talk about it.
Yeah.
I don't believe that they can't remember it. I don't know. I don't really believe that.
It's not glamorous enough.
I feel like it's denial. I mean, you talk in your book about denial, right? Yeah. I mean, I think it's denial.
Sure.
Actually, I actually don't trust them that they don't believe that. I feel it's just,
they're lying to you, Laura.
Well, it's just women are always like you're supposed to be like, I felt nothing in childbirth. The baby popped out. And the next day I was running again. Like you're always supposed to like. The female body is always supposed to, or like I had 500 orgasms. It was amazing. Like it's supposed to be like, but that's like not really the truth. I mean, we
like a machismo. It's like a female machismo of being really like, oh yeah, fine.
Yeah, but it's also based on male ideals for sure, and what males want to hear too. Like I think too, like
right,
or some men, maybe not all men, but some men. Yeah,
right. And it is true that some women don't have super intense symptoms. I think the number I heard was like 85% have significant, hot flashes, sleep problems, weight gain, whatever the other symptoms are. And then 15% just, skate through it. So it's possible.
I mean, in my thing, it's possible that, it's true. I mean, maybe she's like in a really cool menopause family where like they never feel it. I mean, they never feel it at all. Cause I probably talked to 10 women who were like, it was nothing. It was like, I had a hot flash and then I did it. It's over. I do think that probably is true, actually, that they, some women, a small amount of women have very easy times. Yeah.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay. And then we are running out of time. So if anybody has any questions, say them. But I will say that, where am I? That I want to end, on this sort of optimistic note, because this book is optimistic. You talk about the gifts of menopause, and you talk about the best part of a woman's life being after 50, which is a suffragette kind of slogan. And I wonder, what do women who haven't made this transition yet have to look forward to, especially those of us slogging through perimenopause?
Yeah. I mean, let's see. Okay. So I think for me, I can speak for me. I mean, some of the women I interviewed as well, but for me, I have a lot more self-confidence, I would say. I mean, I basically only really care if my partner thinks I'm desirable. And that's like a really big relief, like I don't feel like I have to be like
an audience of thousands. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and also, when you put your self-worth in that way and like other people's hands, it's like not a great situation. So like I see that now is not that, safe and cool. It's a situation. So that makes for a lot of like self-confidence and just like, I think it was Margaret Mead that talked about, menopausal spirit, that you feel there's like a sort of energy boost, which I have felt for sure. I think for me, cycling was hard. I have struggled with depression my whole life, and cycling was really hard for me. Like it was not fun. I mean, that's the weird thing about this whole thing is people are just like, oh, menopause is so bad. I'm like, cycling sucks.
Compared to what?
You've gotten your period for 30 years. It's awful. Like, so you're done with that, which is amazing. Like, let's just like do a round of applause for that. And then also, there's more freedom. Like, some women have their children older, so there may be some like childcare, domestic stuff, but hopefully that will be lessening as time goes on. Actually, less and less. You can sort of concentrate on yourself and your community more. That's very satisfying. I guess I'd say if like the biggest thing is I feel like I'm less motivated by what other people think.
Yeah.
I'm more motivated by like what I want to do. And I try to I feel like I'm also able to concentrate better and go deeper into myself with my work projects, with my spiritual life, even my relationships. I feel like I can see, my actions a little better. Like, should I have said that? Maybe not. Right. Like, I just feel there's a clarity, that I really have enjoyed a lot. And from what I hear, like I have friends, I'm 58, I have friends that are 65, 70, 75, and they say the body does break down and that can be really hard. But as far as the mind, it just gets better and better, which is really fascinating, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. What does your mother think?
What does she think? We need another 45 minutes for that. But I do have a lot of friends who are in their, 60s who do say there's this liberation. There's this sense, like you said, and I think that we talk about invisibility as this terrible thing that happens to women, but I think it's kind of a gift in a lot of ways. I mean, I two of the best reporters I know are both women in their 50s, and I think they are able. People don't think twice about talking to them.
Right.
I think there's that. Yeah. And then they maybe underestimate them. And I think there's actually a great, it's great to be underestimated in a lot of ways, because you get to do all these things and kind of get under the radar, especially if you have a job like a reporter or somebody who's observing. It's a superpower. Yeah.
I mean, it might also be that people are more comfortable with you. Like when you're younger, they have to sort of your sexuality or this or that. But there's a way that you may be in a place where your connections to people are greater. I would argue that as well. Like, as well as the visibility, I would argue I would reframe that as like somewhat positive as well. Actually.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's right. Yeah. This is great. Well, I think we're coming up on our 45 minutes, but what else do you want to talk about or share? Is there anything? So, the hardcover, I think, has done so beautifully, and I feel like I just hear it talked about all the time.
Well, so nice.
Is there anything?
Let's talk about your book a little bit, because I was so fascinated by your book. What I really loved about it was like I actually have read Friends parts of it because it's really funny too.
Thanks.
It's funny about like relationships, I think, in ways that I really enjoy, and not like you're very good at just like putting situations together. But the one that I thought about when I was thinking about, getting prepared for today was the whole idea where the woman goes to therapy and the therapist tries to say like, okay, your husband is a hunter.
Right. And you're a gatherer.
And you're in the hut.
Yeah.
But that just reminded me so much of the way that the medical world, you know what I mean? And also the culture treats menopause. Like it's
totally
very, very old-fashioned ideas that are just kind of crazy. I mean, they're like cray-cray. You know what I mean? Like,
I love that story from that woman. And because then her like sister or somebody says, "Oh, you're in the hut, all right." Because it's like she has this like demanding family and like a hard job and all. Oh, you're in the hut.
But that seemed to be, that was one of the things I loved about your book, is you were talking about like our political, the political world, the financial world, like how Gen X women sort of, how hard it's been actually for some of us to be positioned in that. But you also sort of unearth all the just like kind of like the bullshit ideas.
So many.
So many. And I really appreciate that. And I felt like my book was similar in its project. It was sort of like, okay, let's really look at what this is actually like not like all the sort of ways that it's been packages and what we've been told and whatnot, Yeah. So that's one thing that I really, really loved.
No, and I think you're also, I think your book really does debunk so many so many ideas we have, that it's not sexy, that it's, that it has no meaning, that all these different things. And it's a great gift to women. So thank you so much for writing it, and everybody should buy it. Don't forget, I'm going to go buy it for my friends now with the little green button, because Books and Books also, I think, is, they need all the help we can give them right now. It's a hard time for bookstores. And I'm so glad. It's in paperback. It's so exciting. I feel like now it can be for book clubs.
Yeah,
it'll be a great book club book.
I'll come in and I'll Zoom in your book club.
Oh,
just ask me. Just ask.
Good offer.
I would love that.
That's great. Well, I think we did it. Do you think we did it?
I think you did it. I think you did it.
I mean, I see that we have some questions like down there, but should we worry about that? Or
a lot of them are comments from people.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad they're comments.
Yeah, like people saying, for Ada, how happy to see you. Looking forward to this.
Oh, good.
That was Lisette. So I read her back.
Darcey, anything here? We love all questions.
It's mostly me yelling at people.
Okay, cool.
Badgering them.
Great.
But I don't think that you dug, I think Ada asked you about spirituality and faith, and I don't think you actually answered.
Oh, really? Okay.
I bet she did. You don't think so? Do you want to talk a little more? Because I mean, it is such a theme.
Ask me what you want to know more of. Tell me.
I was waiting for that. What do you think are the spiritual lessons, or just how is it connected to your spirituality?
And what about your dad? Maybe mention also your dad's.
All right. So I'm a minister's daughter.
There you go.
I mean, to me, the major spiritual lesson of this book was just thinking of myself. I mean, it was sort of in some ways, it unlearned my Christianness, more strict Christianness, and kind of brought me back to a sense of nature and myself, maybe more pantheism. And I got more interested in creatures. I think I definitely used Granny J2 like a totem, the whale. I almost in a different sort of religious sense. I used her to pull me through menopause. I used her as this, in some ways, this thing to worship, right? And she's definitely been the gateway to other creatures. I am totally obsessed with animals now. I live right near the Delaware River, and the eels, they migrate all together one night in the fall, and they did it last night. Actually, they do it when the water rises. Oh. And I didn't get down to go see them, but just the fact that I live 5 minutes from them, and I know that there were thousands of eels going back to mate in the Sargasso Sea. I'm just obsessed with animals, and I have to say nature has become a big part of my spiritual life since I've become, as she said, menopause. I feel like I'm a creature among other creatures, and I want to find out more about them. And
I love that.
Yeah. I mean, I also feel that I've I don't know. I mean, I still meditate, but rather than praying to a story, I'd rather just read about spiders. I mean, that's just, and so when I see a spider in my, it's it's very spiritual in a way. But actually, when I see a spider in my shower, I know the kind of web that she made. I know what kind of spider she is, and I have information about what her life is like, you know what I mean? And that's it broadens the universe for me. And that's what religion is supposed to do.
Sure.
But now I have this other new way of doing it, which is really kind of exciting. It's been very thrilling for me, actually.
If you have never read Pilgrim at Tinker Creek.
Of course I have.
By Annie Dillard, I would highly recommend that too.
No, I've read that. I love it. Yeah. It's so good.
Because there's so many threads.
Yeah. Also,
threads, right?
I'm from Roanoke, Virginia, where Tinker Creek.
Wow.
So she was when I was in high school, she won the Pulitzer Prize. So there's a direct line there, my worshiping Annie Dillard in my own life and my own work, for sure. Yeah.
We thank you so much for being with us, in our little virtual universe here at Books and Books. Mm-hmm. And that was a fascinating conversation. So, thank you. I feel like maybe somebody asked a question right now. I saw something.
No, it was Lisette. She was stopped at a stop sign.
Lisette!
Oh, and then somebody just said a comment, which Elizabeth Birdsall, she says, thanks for this. A great thing to listen to on the eve of my 50th birthday.
I love that.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Elizabeth.
Happy birthday, Elizabeth. Exactly.
So I hope that we will see each other in person very
Me
soon
too.
at Books and Books. But until then, let's, keep doing what you do so brilliantly, keep working, writing. I encourage everyone that's joined us from all over, because there are a lot of people here. Please order a copy of the book from Books and Books, and we'll ship it right out to you. And if you're in Miami, you can come by one of the stores and do curbside pickup. And we're happy to do that with you as well. So it was wonderful to see you, to host you. Thank you for being with us and for sharing.
Thank you, Ada, so much. Thank you, Ada.
My pleasure. It's great to see you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. I know, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, then.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye.